Today's video is a lot different than any video that I've ever done. I've had a spiritual awakening on a level that's more profound than any of my previous experiences. And it was brought about by circumstances in my personal life and the world at large. They both seem to coincide at the same time. And I'll speak on the world events. World War III is now a thing. We are in the midst of it. And as I was watching the events unfold, I came soon to realize that this is a spiritual war. That this is a war for the future of humanity. Not just in a materialist sense, but in a spiritual sense. And I had to say, well, where do I stand? What is my role to play in this change that's occurring to the world? Reality is being reshaped through war. And it's not just a materialist war, it's a spiritual war. So where do I stand? Where am I? Right? What's this all about? Well, for the longest time, I have been into philosophy and spirituality and mythology in order to try to manifest, discover a unifying theory of reality. And the first question that has to be answered is, why is there something rather than nothing? Why is there anything at all rather than nothing? And by nothing, I don't mean empty three-dimensional space that's infinite. I mean a void. That is to say, nothing, no thing whatsoever. Because when we go throughout our day, and it's just a given, we take it for granted that we exist, everything around us exists, and I don't slip through things, things are hard, I don't fall off the world, I don't float away. And there's an infinite number of reasons why, we take it for granted. And but when you start thinking, you ask the question, well, why is there something rather than nothing? It doesn't make sense. Because it doesn't make sense that there would be anything at all. So why is there something rather than nothing? And if we look at the atom, we understand that it's not particles in motion. Because those particles are not manifest unless they're observed by consciousness. So our consciousness creates a snapshot of probability that then becomes a state. So what that tells me is that the elementary aspect of reality is probability. And it's this positive and negative force that's revolving around each other. And positive and negative, we give a moralistic framework. We say positive, negative, good, bad, Christ, Antichrist. This is where I'm going. So we have potential. And that potential is two forces that seem to want to be together. They revolve around each other. They're not going away. They try to get together and they can't. and they just revolve around each other eternally, like the yin and yang, right? The symbol of the Tao, right? But for some reason, they don't go their own way. You would think that there's enough space in the universe for them to go away, but they don't, because it's probability, and that probability is actually a force. And then what you see, because there is something rather than nothing, and we say that the quantum state isn't actualized until it's observed, well, that doesn't explain why the universe is as old as it is, unless, of course, consciousness is the fundamental aspect of the universe. And so if consciousness, observing probability, created the universe as sort of a synergy, and you can't even say created, because created we have this Newtonian causality, right? But it's not. The idea about positive and negative, etc., and the quantum state is that the answer to the question, why is there something rather than nothing, is because it's more probable that something exists than it doesn't exist. And so every time that we observe a potentiality, we are creating something. Whether it's positive or negative, there is a creation or a manifestation of that probability. And it's always positive in the sense that there's always something being actualized out of potential. Now, how we ascribe a moral position to what has been actualized, right? Is it creating suffering or is it creating joy? That's where it is, right? So this whole notion stems back to probability in terms of both positive and negative, or Christ and Antichrist, because the void became the monad. The monad is the true God. It is the one and all-encompassing origin of all things. But at the same time, you still have probability. So you still have these force and anti-force. And anti-force does not mean that it's like no force, right? No, it's another force. It's an opposing force. These are opposing forces. And they revolve around each other. They can never capture each other, like the Earth chasing the moon or vice versa. They can never. It's always this eternal, right? And out of that comes the gods, Christ and Antichrist. So the Christ is not to be confused with the monad. The Christ and the Antichrist are aspects of the monad that have arisen. And so that then gives us, right, okay, so Jesus the Christ was a man with a message. And the message was that the Christ is within you. It's not, you don't have to go to a temple to worship Christ, to get in touch with the Christ. You don't even have to worship Christ. You're not supposed to worship Christ because you are the Christ. So there's no use praying to God because you are God. Now there are angels and demons. You can pray to angels and demons to help you. But God is not going to help you because you are God. God is within you. You are an aspect of God. And the notion that love was the foundation or the elementary aspect of the universe, no. Consciousness is the elementary aspect of the universe. And from consciousness, actualize the Christ and the Antichrist. Jesus came to show us that the Christ is within us. Why? Because Christ and Antichrist have been in this battle for who can get as many souls. And the Antichrist is winning. This whole world is set up by the Antichrist's rules to tempt us to be on the side of the Antichrist. And so the Christ was like, what's up with this? I offer so much. I offer transcendence and everlasting peace. Why is everybody so into the Antichrist? So he himself came down in the form of Jesus for the very first time to actually be human and to actually experience what it was like to be human, to learn for some research as to why human beings seem to lean into the Antichrist. Well, what did he discover? He discovered love. When he fell in love with Mary Magdalene, that changed the entire universe. Because the monad, the extension of the monad, the Christ and the Antichrist, they were all self-love. It was all about loving. The God loved the God itself and all of its creations, and did not identify with the creations. The creations were something separate. But once the Christ, as Jesus, fell in love with Mary, he discovered the love of the other. And that changed the monad, and it changed reality. And since time and space are all unified at the top, it seems like it was the fundamental elementary aspect of reality was love, but it wasn't. Not until the Christ experienced love of the other. That's when everything changed. So what does this mean for me practically in experiencing my life? I'm not going to go out and join a church. That would be contradictory to the mission, right? Because Christ is within me. It's no use praying to God because I'm God. That's not going to help. The only thing a human being can really do is lean into the Christ. And the Christ versus Antichrist is a binary system, and every moment of our life is made up of a series of decisions and movements. It looks like we're moving forward, but we're not. It's always now. It's always now, right? So it's always, you can either lean into the Christ or lean into the Antichrist. So now I see that now. And it has profoundly changed it's just a moment-to-moment experience. I've never experienced something so profoundly changing inside of my consciousness and my spirituality. And for the first time in my life, I actually understand what my spirituality is. So, for the longest time, my music used to be it was the most important thing in my life. And now I realize that it's an expression. And I always knew that, but I had this, deep-rooted attachment. And I don't have that anymore. Now I see that the dedication is to lean into the Christ in every possible moment, in every possible situation, in every possible relationship that I have with all of you and the world at large. So I'm not joining a church. I'm not joining any organizations. I won't be doing anything like that, but yeah. And remember, I'm differentiating between Jesus, the Christ, and the Christ. They're two separate. They're the same and they're separate. Because Jesus was a man. And and that was the message. Don't worship me, worship the Christ within you. off the top of my head, I think that's all I have to say. Except, I guess, Christ be with you. That's a church saying, and I don't want to... Yeah, you have to stay away from dogma. Because the Christ is within. You do not need a teacher. You do not need an authority. You do not need a temple. You do not need an authority. So anything authoritarian is of the Antichrist. Let me just, right? So much is of the Antichrist. But authoritarianism, in all of its forms, is of the Antichrist, right? So going out and joining and worshiping somebody else, prophets, teachers, mystagogues of any sort, that's not the way. The way is acknowledging the Christ within, acknowledging the Christ within others, and just leaning into Christ. Take care, keep cool, and stay in tune.